Elena Voss had learned, over 5 long years, how to disappear in plain sight. She kept her eyes low, her voice soft, her steps quiet. She had learned to answer to a name that was not hers, to smile at strangers without letting them see too much, and to raise a bright, fearless little boy without ever once telling him the truth about his father. She told herself this was safety. She told herself this was love, a mother's love, the kind that asks for nothing in return except her son's survival. That morning, the village of Ashwell was busier than usual. Banners hung from the shop fronts. Children had been scrubbed and dressed in their best clothes, and the bakery down the street had sold out of honey bread before the sun was even fully up. The Alpha King was coming. Elena had known this was coming for weeks. The whole village had known. The King of Blackthorn Ridge was traveling through the northern territories to renew old treaties with the smaller packs, and Ashwell, small and forgettable as it was, had been chosen as one of his stops. She had told herself she would simply stay inside that day. She would keep the clinic shutters closed, tell her patients she was unwell, and wait for the king's procession to pass through and vanish again, the way storms do. But 5-year-olds do not care about storms. "Mama, can we go? Can we go see the king?" Milo had asked her 3 times before breakfast, his dark eyes wide and pleading, so much like someone else's eyes that Elena sometimes had to look away from her own son just to breathe. "We'll see," she had told him, which both of them knew meant yes. So there she was, standing at the edge of the village square with her son's small hand in hers, telling herself that no one would recognize her. She had changed so much. Her hair was different now, cut short and dyed a duller brown. She wore the plain clothes of a village healer instead of the fine things she used to wear. She had practiced, for years, keeping her shoulders low and her chin down, the opposite of how she used to stand. And when the royal procession entered the square, when the crowd hushed and bowed, and Cade Thorne stepped down from his carriage in his dark formal coat, broad-shouldered and unsmiling and achingly familiar, Elena kept her head down and told herself, over and over, like a prayer, "He will not know me. He will not know me. He will not know me." For a moment, it seemed to work. Cade's gaze swept over the gathered villagers the way a king's gaze does, assessing, distant, dutiful. It passed over Elena once without pausing. She let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding, but then his eyes came back. Just for a second, just long enough that Elena felt her whole body go cold. He was frowning slightly, the way a person frowns when a stranger's face stirs something they cannot name. She watched him almost take a step toward the crowd, and she pulled Milo a little closer, angling her body so that her son was half hidden behind her skirt. Then one of the pack elders stepped forward to greet him, and the moment passed. Cade turned to accept the formal welcome, and Elena allowed herself to breathe again. It should have ended there. It almost did. The ceremony went on for nearly an hour, full of speeches and treaty scrolls and formal bowing that Elena barely listened to. She kept her eyes on the ground, kept her hand wrapped tightly around Milo's, and counted the minutes until it would be over, and she could take her son home, and lock the door, and remind herself why she had done all of this in the first place. She had not accounted for how bored a 5-year-old could get. Milo had been remarkably patient for a child his age, but patience has limits, and his had finally run out. He had spotted, near the front of the crowd, a dog trotting along the base of the dais, tail wagging, completely unbothered by the solemnity of the occasion. And more than that, he had spotted the tall man in the dark coat standing above everyone else, the one all the grown-ups kept bowing to, the one who, Milo would later say, looked exactly like the man in the one photograph Elena kept locked in the bottom of her jewelry box, the one she never let him look at for long. Children notice more than adults think they do. Before Elena could react, before her fingers could even tighten around his, Milo slipped free of her hand and darted through the crowd. "Milo," she called, but her voice was swallowed by the noise of the ceremony, and by the time she pushed her way forward, her son was already halfway to the dais, small legs carrying him faster than she had ever seen him run. The crowd began to notice. Murmurs rippled outward. Guards shifted, unsure whether to intervene, unsure whether a child running toward the king was a threat or simply a child. Milo did not stop at the edge of the dais. He climbed the 2 low steps without hesitation, crossed the platform, and threw his arms around the leg of the Alpha King of Blackthorn Ridge, as though he had done it 100 times before. "Daddy!" The word rang out across the suddenly silent square. Cade Thorne went very still. For one long, terrible moment, nobody moved. The guards did not move, the elders did not move. Even the dog, sensing something enormous happening, sat down and went quiet. Cade looked down. He looked down at the small boy wrapped around his leg, at dark hair that curled the exact way his own had curled when he was a child, at a stubborn little chin lifted upward, waiting. Milo, confused by the silence, by the fact that no one had answered him, did what any child does when the adults around him seem to have stopped listening. He said it again, louder this time, more insistent. "Daddy, it's me." Something broke open in Cade's face. Elena, pushing through the crowd at last, saw it happen, saw 5 years of grief and control crack apart in an instant. He knelt down slowly, as though his legs might not hold him, and looked into the boy's face at eye level. "What did you say?" Cade's voice was barely above a whisper, but in the silence of the square, everyone heard it. "Daddy," Milo said again, quieter now, suddenly uncertain, sensing that something enormous was happening that he did not understand. "You're my daddy. Mama has your picture." Elena reached the dais just as Cade lifted his gaze from their son's face to hers. She had imagined this moment 1,000 times in 5 years of hiding. In her imagination, she always had something prepared to say. Some careful explanation, some gentle way to soften the truth. But standing there, in front of the whole village, with her son's small hand now reaching for hers, and Cade's eyes locked on her face like he was seeing a ghost stand up and walk, every rehearsed word disappeared. Elena. Just her name. Just that. And the whole world seemed to tilt around it. Cade. She hadn't said his name aloud in 5 years. It felt strange in her mouth, like a language she had forgotten how to speak. "You're alive," he said it, like he still didn't quite believe it, like he needed to say the words to test whether they were true. "I'm alive," she said softly. "They told me," his voice broke. He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. They both remembered what he had been told. The border skirmish, the scattered pack, the list of the missing that had, over time, quietly become a list of the dead. "I know what they told you," Elena said. "I let them tell you that. I'm sorry." The crowd around them had gone utterly silent, watching a private grief play out in public, but Elena barely noticed them anymore. All she could see was Cade, still kneeling, one hand resting gently on Milo's small shoulder, as though he was afraid the boy might vanish if he let go. "Why?" Cade asked, not angry, not yet, just lost. "Why would you let me believe that?" Elena knelt down too, so that the three of them were level with one another, a strange small circle in the middle of the grand ceremony. "Because of what was happening in Blackthorn Ridge. The attacks on your bloodline, the people who wanted your line ended before it could continue. I was carrying your son, Cade, and I was terrified that if anyone knew, they would use him against you, or worse. You could have told me. I would have protected you both." "You were fighting a war for your throne," Elena said, her voice trembling now. "I couldn't ask you to fight another one for us, so I ran. I changed my name. I told everyone I met a story that wasn't true, and I raised him to believe his father was gone, because I thought that was safer than the truth." Cade looked down at Milo again, at the small boy watching the two of them with wide, uncertain eyes, sensing sadness in the air, but not fully understanding it. "He's beautiful," Cade said quietly. "He has your eyes." "He has your everything else," Elena said, and for the first time in 5 years, she let herself smile, just a little, through the tears that had begun to fall. Slowly, carefully, Cade rose to his feet. He did not look angry anymore. He looked like a man who had been carrying an enormous weight for 5 years, and had just been told all at once that he no longer had to. "I'm not going to pretend the last 5 years didn't happen," he said, loud enough now for those nearby to hear, though gentler than before. "I'm not going to pretend it doesn't hurt, knowing what I lost. But I am not going to lose another day." "Cade, come home," he said. "Not because you have to, not because of the crown, or the treaties, or anything else. Come home because Milo deserves a father who stands beside him in the daylight, and because I never stopped loving you, even when I thought I was only loving a memory." Elena looked at her son, who was looking back and forth between them with the particular hopeful expression that only children seem to master. The expression that says, "Please let this be a happy thing." "I'm tired of hiding," Elena admitted, and it was the truest thing she had said in 5 years. "I'm so tired, Cade." "Then stop," he said simply. "You don't have to anymore." The crowd, sensing that whatever had just happened was ending gently rather than badly, began to murmur again, softer this time, warmer, the sound of people witnessing something they would talk about for years to come. Cade reached down and lifted Milo easily onto his shoulders, the way fathers do, as though he had practiced it 1,000 times instead of never once. Milo let out a delighted laugh, suddenly forgetting the tension of a moment before, delighted simply to be high above the crowd, held steady by strong hands. "Again," Milo shouted, not asking to be put down and lifted again, but simply announcing his father's name the way he had before, this time with pure joy instead of confusion. "Daddy, look how high!" Cade laughed, a real laugh, the first Elena had heard from him in 5 years, warm and unguarded. "Yes," he said, looking at his son on his shoulders and then at Elena beside him, reaching for her hand. "Daddy, again." They walked out of the square together as the sun climbed higher over Ashwell, no longer strangers pretending not to know one another, no longer a secret carried in silence, just a family, finally choosing to be found.